Today's podcast is brought to you by Tetra Hearing. Tetra Hearing isn't just hearing protection, it's hearing perfection.
Dude, so I got up. They're still in the box. I'm talking to Gus about it. Like, oh, they're gonna jump today. We do something. I get my coffee ready or whatever, and I go back to it. They're all gone. I was like, no way.
That's terrible.
Wyatt was way into it, man. He just wanted to. Every time he got home from school, he'd be like, Dad, can we put the YouTube video on? I'd be like, yeah, go ahead. And he he's learning like the stupid screen and stuff, you know? So he's like searching on California waterfowl YouTube and pulling it up on his own.
I was about it. I was just like watching, and then like, you know, I'd go back and like see the hen do something. Like, what is she doing? And then like see her roll her egg, and I was like, oh. Yeah. And she like move them around. And
we saw cool. I mean, the picking up the female took the egg out of the box, like you always hear about that, and then like seeing it on
shells
video
and stuff.
Yeah.
I was like, what is going on right now?
That was probably the coolest part of the interactions with her. I thought like in the box. Was
well, like once they hatched, it was like she didn't even care about the ducklings. She just wanted to eat the membrane. Like I didn't realize how it was like an incentive to have a nest was to sit there and just chow on the membrane. Yeah. I mean, you always hear about it, but like
compared to whatever she was eating in Butte Creek or whatever, it tastes pretty good.
Crazy. Yeah. Well, if you guys haven't noticed, we have some normal faces or voices on our podcast today. So we have Brian Huber and Jason Coslovich, both CWA biologists, and today we're going to talk about all things wood ducks, rocket netting, pintail, and what we're currently talking about, the 1 millionth wood duck. And if you guys didn't check out the live stream that we had going on, we'll talk about how we got the live stream to happen. It was a pretty cool experience, even for somebody like myself and you guys as biologists, to see a bird in their natural habitat when we normally don't get to see them and the stuff they're doing. Like I said, the hen was eating the membranes was what it was?
Yeah. So after they hatch, the shell kind of pops open and there's like a little membrane that kind of holds the embryo sac in there. And that has a lot of nutrients or value to it. And like it was just crazy watching how intense she was eating those membranes. I mean, you could almost tell when another egg hatched because she would just start chowing down on another membrane.
You know? That's wild.
Flinging them in the air. And
I saw that. She like shaking around.
Yeah. But yeah, like you said, it was just really neat. As a biologist, you hear about all these things. You hear about, the other hens coming in and dumping eggs. You hear about hooded mergansers coming in. You hear about them pulling an egg out of the nest and flying away with it. And you hear about it, but like actually watching her do all those things and, seeing all the other birds jump in there. And, she went out and took a break and a hooded merganser jumped in. I don't think it laid an egg, but it was sitting in there and you could see it was like messing with her nest. And then you look up and another hooded merganser pops her head in and then they both fly away. And it's just, it's just crazy how much activity's there when you put that camera in there and you start watching, so.
Yeah, that's crazy. So talk about the camera and what we did exactly to get the feed up, because it took a little bit of ingenuity.
Yeah, I mean, we had this idea. It's the 1 millionth wood duck. We wanted to try and do something special, to kind of showcase, all the efforts that the program's done over the years. And so we got with actually a local company in Yuba City that does kind of security cameras and stuff, and we ordered some cameras from them, and they actually came out and helped us install them. But we did it at our Sanborn Slough right by the clubhouse. One of the boxes there just always gets used, and so we actually had 2 cameras just to kind of double down in case one didn't get used. But the first one hatched so fast that we kind of missed it, before we kind of got our act together.
Oh, really? I noticed when I was out there was 2 cameras. But
yeah, there's
like,
2.
We have 1 feed.
Yeah, but so we had one set up, but it already had a nest in it, and then we were trying to get the internet running, and it was live streaming is not as easy as it sounds, and so there was a bunch of hiccups. We originally got it up and running, and I could see it on my phone, and it was working, and then you have to have a computer out there, and I'm like, oh crap, I don't have a computer, so now I got to come to the office, check out a computer, bring it up there, and now we have Eli helping us do the live stream, and he has to have remote access to the computer. Well, the computer's out in the middle of Sanborn Slough. It's out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, that's
really
good
service out there.
Yeah, zero cell service.
Yeah, no cell service. But the internet was decent, to start. And, we didn't really check into our internet plan or anything like that. Well, sure enough, you're live streaming. We wiped out our data like within a couple hours or 24 hours.
I remember seeing a few people like, where'd the stream go? And I'm like, I don't know. And then
so we kind of
had our data.
So we kind of had to double back and be like, okay, like we can't have this thing running 24/7. We're going to wait until it gets closer to hatch, So me and Jason kept a really good eye On the eggs, we'd go and check, so you can candle the eggs, you can look at it, and it kind of shows you the developmental stage of the embryo. And as it develops, you can tell, basically predict 28 days from incubation is when they're going to hatch, generally speaking. So you can look and you can determine, when they're going to hatch. So we pretty much had we had the hatch date within 2 days, I think.
Yeah, I mean it varies. You could tell when they're going to start pipping, but then how long it takes them to get out of the egg, and how long it takes them to dry off and get ready to jump with mom is, it varies a couple of days. So we had it narrowed down to 2 or 3 days.
So we kind of, once they started pipping, we're like, okay, it's going to happen soon. And then, everything in the literature, it's like, okay, they're going to pip, they're going to come out of the egg, and then within 24 hours, they're going to jump out of the nest. And so we're like, okay, 24 hours, it's kind of in the middle of the day, but, they usually jump in the morning. So
will they jump at night?
They will,
good.
but generally they jump in the morning.
Gotcha.
Yeah, because then, the mom, from my understanding, the mom kind of has a plan, right? She's going to get them out and get them to cover right away. You don't want to get them out at night and be, scattering
dealing
ducklings
with
all
crazy
over the
wood
place.
duck ducklings in the middle of the night.
So it was, it was just cool. I don't know. I think you guys all watched the video that we put together, but you saw them pipping. They come out. The mom's there. She kind of leaves, and the ducklings started getting more active, and then I didn't realize how they were just like little bouncing balls. I thought they'd kind of generally climb up the ladder that we spend all this time cutting out in the wood shop. And no, those things were like little bouncy balls just jumping up and right out the hole. I mean, it was cool, and it was in. I think it was within 3 minutes. All those ducklings were out of that box
From first one to last one.
Yeah, it happened quick. That's what I was so surprised.
That last one was worrying because it kept jumping.
Yeah.
The light was shining through the hole in the box and reflecting into the sidewall of the box, and it kept trying to jump through that light spot. And I was like, great, now this duckling's going to jump until it dies of exhaustion.
Oh my
trying to get out of the fake hole in the side of the box, but luckily it figured it out.
And that's that was kind of terrifying about doing the live stream is it's nature. Stuff happens in nature. There's nothing stopping a raccoon or a ringtail cat from coming in there and destroying the nest or the hen or whatever. So it was terrifying but relieving once they all jumped out. We're like, whew, they made it. There's nothing
Did you guys have to sit there? I think you went out there. Do you have to sit there for hours waiting for that shot with Eli?
It wasn't too long. It was 3 or 4 hours maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't bad.
Just sitting in the ground blind waiting for him to hop out.
Yeah. And then we could sit there and shoot the shit, talk, and then you could tell watching the live feed and seeing what the hen was doing when she started popping her head out of the box. It was pretty obvious,
Gotcha.
it's about to go.
Did
down.
the hen pinpoint you guys in the ground blind? Was she paying much attention to you guys sitting there?
No. We had that ground blind set up for a couple of days, and I mean that box is right next to our Sandmore clubhouse. We have technicians living there, so they're pretty used to foot traffic, human activity, so it wasn't a big deal.
Nice. Yeah, so if anyone missed the live stream, you can go to our YouTube channel and find the video of all that footage from the beginning to the end. Highly suggest going on there. Hit the subscribe button while you're at it. But super cool video to see it from start to finish. I know we watched it with our family once it was all done and whatnot to kind of see it.
Yeah, cool. My 7-year-old son was just glued to it, and he was at school when they jumped, so he was pretty bummed that I saved the clip and showed him, so he was pretty excited about it.
Is that something we're going to do yearly? Do we have the equipment or do we rent it?
We own the equipment. Next year we might do it at a not so remote location.
Yeah,
so,
that would help.
So somebody's, maybe somebody's house that has a box close by that, is easily accessible to a computer.
Gotcha.
Maybe has a little bit, pretty much Jake's house. Yeah, he's got a nice setup over there. So, we're going to try and do it again next year. We'll see if it works out. Yeah.
Nice. So how are we looking this year compared to past years in the spring for egg salvage, just banding programs and waterfowl programs as a whole?
Egg salvage doing decent. It's not going to be a record year by any means, but it's going to be a lot better than it was last year.
So you're right in the middle of it or kind of getting towards your end now?
Towards the end. Wheat harvest is midway, starting to wrap up right now, and then by middle of July, it's pretty much over with. Not a ton of nests on the ground. We've been monitoring a lot of fields for the Nesting Bird Habitat Incentive Program. Not a ton of nests in those fields, but there are some. The biggest problem we have is predation, but that's Mother Nature. Nothing we can do about that.
Predation via raccoons, coyotes. What's the biggest predator that they run into?
Yeah.
Avians?
I think what does USGS say? It's raccoons, possums, skunks, and then avian, so ravens and hawks.
Interesting.
And so yeah, we're dealing with that. But from what I've seen on the ground, if the birds are making it from the nest to the water, they're having super good survival. Like I fish a lot in the Delta, and you get to keep pretty good tabs on broods hanging out in certain areas. Like you'll see the same mom with the same ducklings. And in past years, I mean, you'd see here with 8 or 10 freshly hatched ducklings. You come back a week or two later, and there's 3 left.
Yeah.
Well, this year, I mean, right now they're all pretty much almost flighted or flighted, and the smallest brood I've seen is 5. So
That's good.
once they get it to water, they're doing really well this year, and so hopefully, hopefully another wet year.
In Sassoon, man, there's just different stages of
There's like
ducklings and
puffballs to
everywhere.
full-fledged.
everywhere.
Yeah.
I heard YOLO Wildlife Area is loaded with broods right now. Too,
Yeah,
so.
no, it's good to see. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just finally right.
I mean, we had some pretty good conditions, weather-wise. We had a decent wet, early wet spring, that provided pretty good, really good vegetation growth, for nesting. So kind of bummed we're not seeing a huge, increase in the nesting, but it'll be really good for the broods. There's a lot of water out there in those little, wetlands and stuff. They got that water. So.
The survival will be good.
Yeah.
Which is good.
But we'll know the state already did the breeding pair survey, so in August they usually come out with that. So we'll have a good index from there to kind of base, off of previous years once that
What's
comes
the
out.
anticipation like? Just kind of word on the street. How's everything looking?
I mean, from what I've heard, they saw pretty good production, which is good. But it sounds like the numbers are not bouncing back like we were hoping they would after a couple of good seasons of wet weather, So there's a lot going on in the Sac Valley. The habitat's changed a lot, and we just don't have the mallards nested in the valley like we used to, So a lot of programs that we're involved with, the delayed wheat, the NB-HIP, the nesting bird habitat incentive program, we're doing our best to try and get that habitat back out there for our local mallards.
Gotcha. Now, what about like down in the grasslands in those areas? What's our grasp down there?
I've heard good things. I haven't been down there to check it out myself, but I mean, we've banded down there several years in the past, and we always have a lot of people wanting us to come back and band down there, so they always giving me updates throughout the spring on what they're seeing, and I'm hearing there's broods on all the normal brood ponds, and everything's looking good, so I'd imagine there's decent production down on the grasslands.
Nice.
And then Klamath, obviously, with the water they got this
They
year.
still have water.
John Bradenberg, who was on the podcast, he sounds like he's pretty stoked and has high hopes for our banding up there this summer.
When do you guys leave for that?
Middle of July 15th,
Okay, so-
July 20th. Sometime we'll roll up there.
Yeah.
A month, basically.
Where are our crews going to be this summer?
Tule Lake and Klamath.
That's
it?
Yep. I mean, it's hard to go anywhere else when you can go up there and catch as many birds in one night as you do anywhere else in the state in a 6-8 week season.
Yeah.
So
You guys are doing that mostly by airboat?
yeah,
We'll-
we'll run traps by airboat. Hopefully, some traps will be foot accessible, so we don't have to run the airboat everywhere. And then we're doing the 2 nights a week night lighting with the airboat. So
Gotcha.
yep.
That's good stuff.
Yeah, and all the indication from up there is that they've got a really successful hatch and production up there. A lot of ducks already on all those units. John was saying he's already seeing molters come up there too, which is pretty
nice.
awesome.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, should be good. We're looking forward to heading up there and banding 10,000 birds, right? That's our goal.
How long will you guys be up there once you start?
6 weeks.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Right through the end of August usually.
Yeah.
And then right after that, we jump right in September, first week of September. We usually start pintail trapping. There's enough pintail
Sac
in the
Valley.
Yeah. Yep.
And you guys have tried down further south in the past too, but mostly it seems like Sac Valley.
Yeah, I mean the right before the season, most of the wildlife areas flood up a good chunk of land, and they've got a lot of loafing habitat. That's what kind of the pintail prefer in the preseason. Like nice dirt islands, dirt roads. That's where they like to loaf when it's hot weather. So a lot of the wildlife areas up here have that habitat, and then there's just it's almost, middle of August, late August, there's just the pintails start showing up. And then first week of September, there's usually enough around where we can go chase them and set some nets out and start catching them.
Do you guys have any partnership programs with like the telemetry? I know we had a little bit of hand in that in the past.
We work
putting
closely with
backpacks.
USGS.
Okay.
Yeah. Anytime we get a rocket net shot and we know that they're trying to get transmitters out, we send them a text right away like, hey, we got, this many widgeon, this many pintail, this many, what do you need? And
Oh,
they'll be like,
perfect.
oh, save us 10 hen widgeon. So throw them in the crate, set them aside, and they'll show up shortly after.
Yeah, or they'll
Throw
just
some
we'll be
transmitters
like,
on.
hey, we got good potential to shoot a net today, and they'll just send their crew up with us and do it. So they're doing a bunch of transmitters again this year. I'm not sure what the species breakdown is, but I mean, obviously they want to do a lot of hen mallards, to kind of keep tabs on them, and so yeah, like Jason said, anytime we know we're going to catch birds, we just keep in touch with them and try and coordinate with them. So they possibly will be running a banding crew too at Sac Refuge, possibly.
They'll be in the grasslands this year.
Are they going down there? Yeah.
My carpenter's working for them now, and he said he's heading down to the
really?
grasslands next week. So
Yeah,
Nice.
they're trying to kind of spread out their distribution of where the transmitters are. A lot of them have been through
Sac
us and with
Valley.
them, Sac Valley, Sassoon Marsh. They've got a lot of transmitters from down there, so they're trying to expand the range of the transmitters. To get a better idea of what all the birds are doing. Not just from specific
Just
areas.
smart in a scientific aspect.
Yeah. Yep.
Get a wider population.
Can you talk a little bit about the grant that we got with Sitka?
For
With,
the drone.
Yeah, that and the backpacks as well.
Yeah, so we've worked with Sitka over the years. They have a conservation grant program that we've applied for over the last couple of years that we've been successful in getting some funding from them. So what was that, 2 years ago? Well, a year? What was that, 2022?
2 years ago, we got
Yeah.
the
2022
transmitter grant.
Yeah, we wrote a grant to track like postseason mallards. And so we worked with Sitka. We were able to get 20 new transmitters, and then USGS had 20 transmitters too. So there was a total of 40 transmitters that got out, and we were just kind of tracking. The idea was if we, a lot of research has been done on mallards during the summer, but when you have a harsh winter, you get more birds from the north pushing down. And so we wanted to try and capture some of those birds to kind of see some of those more northern movements. I don't have the numbers with me. I had them written down at one point, but it was, at least half of them made some big movements north. We had one couple go all the way up to Canada, one in British Columbia, one in Alberta. So it was neat, seeing that, and then, seeing if they were, the females, watching them do their nesting and stuff with those transmitters.
Yeah.
And then just recently, this last year, we wrote another grant that we got accepted to purchase a thermal drone. And so me and Jason both got licensed to fly the drone. It's a beautiful drone. And the goal was to try and locate nests in our ag fields to kind of lessen the impact on the fields that we're having. And we're struggling trying to find the nest, but it's working really good. If we know where a nest is, you can kind of zoom down on it. And then it also works really good for like brood surveys. So you can kind of get an idea of the production around the fields by checking out the broods, with the thermal camera. And then, the zoom on it's amazing. You can find the birds using the thermal, and then you can go to the zoom camera and zoom in and like get so close that you can identify the species.
That's wild.
And then we also, with that grant too, we got a grant through Sitka to purchase wood duck box equipment
that's
and
cool.
supplies. So we've, I think so far we've installed about 100 new boxes on some properties. With boxes and poles, so they gave us some money to fund building wood duck boxes.
Oh, perfect.
So
Right on.
yep.
Okay, that's pretty sweet. I know you brought some data with you that you wanted to share. So is that 2023 band data, or what is that?
Yeah, no, and so we kind of 2023 we do it through the year, our banding numbers. So I just brought kind of our totals from last year. 2024 we basically haven't really started yet because most of our banding season starts summer, and then we have our preseason. Postseason this year was kind of light. We used to get funding from the state duck stamp. We don't get that funding anymore for postseason pintail banding, and they're not using that data in the models. A lot of the future scientists and stuff like that data because it's comparing 2-season banding. So you have preseason, postseason, so you're getting different survival rates. When you do preseason, you get survival rates from hunting, but when you do postseason, you can get survival rates from nesting season, which is important too. So we still think there's a value in doing that. I don't know what we're going to do this year, if we're going to do the postseason pintail trapping like we've done. I'd like to see it continue. But so this year for postseason, we kind of went down to the Delta and we tried to band some birds down there, and we just could not get the birds on bait. We put traps out, we put bait out, and the birds just weren't responding. And also some of the areas we were at were just, flooded with geese. And so the geese kind of push a lot of the ducks out. So I think we saw maybe 25 pintail the whole time we were down there. If
Yeah,
that.
the habitat. I mean, we were targeting whatever would have caught
Yeah.
mallards, wood ducks, whatever would have swam in. But the habitat down there is tough. It's smaller holes, a lot of timber, a lot of thick vegetation, so it's hard to set up a rocket net. I mean, you got to be able to view a rocket net from several hundred yards away, so and have a clean edge to set it on. There just wasn't a lot of that down there, and so we set up some bait sites to try and get some birds hooked on the bait to get them in swimming traps. But a lot of those duck clubs down there have plenty of food, smart
They
weed,
don't
water
need- they don't
grass,
need the
flooded
bait.
corn.
Corn,
so-
the flooded corn was,
And it's just-
they
yeah,
had
it was
all that
tough.
flooded corn all year that they were probably pushing the birds out of, and then once the season was over, they just flooded in there. They didn't care about any of our bait. They had
Yeah,
plenty of
that's
food
tough
on
to compete with.
Yeah, up in rice country, when we're doing the postseason in the rice, most of that rice has been depleted.
Yeah.
It's degraded from being soaking in the water for so long, and so if you throw out fresh bags of rice, I mean those pintail, usually the coots get it first, but the pintail just line up and it's a feeding buffet for them.
Yeah.
We just didn't experience that down in the Delta, so. We didn't actually catch any birds down there, and then we had some transmitters that we wanted to get back out. So ones that we found off of dead birds or harvested birds, and so we ran up back to the Sac Valley and we shot a couple rocket nets off and caught just under 200 birds, mostly green-winged teal. But we got our mallards. We had 4 transmitters we were trying to get out, so we got those back out, and so that was our postseason.
Now,
But-
can you speak to the swimming traps for people that don't know what those are or look like and how those work?
Almost like picture a giant minnow trap, but half of it's out of the water. So it's
minnow
just
trap.
a big 4 foot tall, 1 by 2 inch welded wire. I mean, we make them, I think when you roll them out flat, they're like 20 feet long. And then you kind of cut a door in them and make this door hinge. But basically where the two ends meet, they come together and we make a funnel. The funnel is roughly a foot or two deep, about 6-8 inches wide, just big enough to let a duck through, but not let him back out. And then so basically when you're doing swimming trapping, find an area with a lot of ducks. Hopefully they're either molting adults or ducklings. Flighted birds are harder to catch because they can fly to their food source and back, and so they're not as desperate to feed on something. But molting adults and ducklings are pretty vulnerable because they're stuck in one spot. And so you put some, fresh rice or corn out in a permanent wetland. That's the only real good food source available. They hit that pretty hard. You get them hooked on it for a couple days, put this big swimming trap up in that area, and you basically just throw your bait right there in the funnel, and they are used to going right to that exact spot where that bait was. And so they kind of just dabble their way in, dipping up and down. And when you get a lot of birds, they kind of almost push each other into the trap. And then they just kind of swim around the edges trying to get their way out, but they can't, they don't figure out to go through the funnel.
Yeah.
Unless they're a wood duck. Wood ducks figure that out pretty good. But,
Really?
yeah. Big dumb mallards don't figure that out. And then we have a little float in there so they can get out and preen themselves and stuff. Because we check them once a day, so they're in there sometimes up to, 18, 20 hours without being harassed. So, yeah.
Yeah, I've
fun.
sat there with a spotting scope and watched the wood ducks just go in and out
Really?
like bees. Yeah, so
Huh.
they figure it out pretty quick.
That's wild.
Yeah, I wonder what the mallards are thinking when they can't figure out to get out the same way they came in, but the wood ducks can.
Yeah.
Just food. They're like, food. There's pigs picking out in there.
So guys, why do we ban ducks, and why are we so passionate about, especially banning pintails?
It's just good data. We got to keep track of everything that's going on out in the environment, whether that's hunter harvest, natural mortality, all kinds of different metrics that are happening while, we're not out there watching. You can't be out there watching them 24/7, tracking every bird individually. So banning is important to kind of get an idea of where these birds are going, what's happening to them, and all that data goes into big models like the pintail model that just got revised, and all that helps us better set hunting regulations and manage our populations better.
So when you guys submit your data, other people have access to it, and are using that data, or are we categorizing it all, compiling it, and then sending it out to these folks?
So the BBL, Bird Banding Lab, federal, I believe they're under USGS. Bird Banding Lab is in control of all the banding data. So basically you have to order your bands through them. They send you your bands. You put the bands out. You compile the data, and then you feed it back to the BBL, and they enter it in their big database. So once it's in their big database, then any bander, researcher, or whatever can use that data, for the models and stuff.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Perfect.
Got to share the science, as they say.
Yeah.
As they say.
So you go for it.
Well, I was going to say, like last year, 2023, just kind of go through some of the numbers.
Yeah.
We banded a total of 8,549 birds. So that's including rocket netting pintails, nest trapping mallards, our egg salvage program. And then when we go up to Northeastern, we work really close with the USGS, and we kind of have it worked out where we ban the mallards, they ban all the other ducks. So those are all tallied up in there. But our number one bird last year was mallards, 3,000 mallards, and then pintail, 2,270, and then gadwall, 1,700.
Gads, nice.
227 cinnamon teal.
That's cool.
Yeah, so just kind of some oddballs.
I was
Green
gonna say,
teal.
and what's the unique bird of the season?
10 blue wing teal, which
Oh,
is kind of
wow.
cool. We kind of got into those up in Northeastern. We're seeing more and more of those around. I don't think we got any hybrids,
No hybrids
last year.
this year?
No, but we're seeing more of like the what do you call them? The female that's showing male characteristics.
Hermaphrodites.
Yeah, hermaphrodites.
So we saw like we had a mallard, that kind of had the green head and started, pretty obvious, and
Yeah.
almost had like curls, on the back, but
Yeah.
like the bill was
Bill's
still
still him.
orange, female, and then we under the hood it was all female too. So it seems like we're seeing those when pintail and in mallards. I know we got a nice one up in Tule Lake last year, night lighting. So
Yeah, that's interesting. And in terms of like our contribution, you said around 8,000 birds. How many ducks are getting banded in a year throughout the nation? Any idea?
it's a lot. I want to say, if I say something, it's just not going to be.
I think it's
it's a lot, hundreds of
60
thousands.
60 million total have ever been banded, right?
Yeah,
Something
probably
like
total.
that.
But yeah, I wanted to say like almost 1 million a year, but that sounds too high. But yeah, I'm not sure what the actual number is nationwide.
Yeah.
Do we have any data on how many birds that we see out of your 8,000 that got shot last year, or bands returned via?
We get
the
band
BBL?
returns every 2 weeks,
Yeah.
roughly. And so, opening day, the band return after that, it's got 200 or 300 bands on it.
Gotcha.
But unless you sit down and crunch the numbers, it's hard to really say exactly how many of our bands are being returned. But I think across the board, it's roughly 5 or 6%
It's pretty low,
of
yeah.
bands ever get returned, and it varies across species
still
and stuff. Like a
crazy to
Canada
me,
goose in Minnesota, they're going to be over 10% band returns, and then like a blue wing teal in Louisiana is going to be less than 1%. So,
But then you have like pintail that aren't getting harvested at a high rate, right? So their bands aren't getting reported that high just because they're not getting harvested at a high rate. So,
but in general, I
all
tell
that
people
stuff
5 or
factors in.
6% of bands ever
Yeah.
get returned. So.
but we could. I mean, if you ask that question, we can go and tease that data out. If
Yeah, you
wanted
could
to.
figure it out if
we
you
just
needed
we
to.
do it like we send report to our wood duck banders.
Yeah.
So every year, like we have sub banders that band under our permit that we've trained over the years. They band wood ducks for us, and every year we send them a report of where bands got shot for
Okay.
that season, and then we do the same thing for our egg salvage facilities.
Gotcha.
We can tease it out. So like Rancho Esquan, we'll do a report for them and show them where those birds were shot. So it's neat, seeing, the outliers, the ones that go to Idaho or, we've had some go to Arkansas, just like, the crazy movements that these birds do occasionally. So,
Okay, I know Jason had touched on it a little bit with the banding and affecting bag limits and options that are out there. So pass this to either one of you. We had a change in our pintail policy lately, federally, on the federal side, and I think you guys can touch on a little more about the scientific, what's going on, and explain it a little bit better than probably I can.
Yeah, so basically, they revised the pintail model, and currently we're going to be under an interim pintail model, and so basically that's a trial basically for 3 years, and if all the flyways agree that we like it, we'll adopt it, and if some of the flyways disagree, we can work on making some changes to improve the model to where everybody agrees on it. But basically, going forward, not this next season, but the season afterwards, what would that be? The 25,
25,
26.
26, yeah.
We will have a chance at 3 pintail, an option.
Yeah.
If the breeding surveys on pintail show that the populations are substantial enough to support that.
So it is kind of confusing, right? It's a new model that
It's
just
very
came out.
confusing,
It's
yeah.
confusing. There's a lot of unanswered questions. But it's basically, like Jason said, it's an intern population harvest strategy. And it is a 3-year thing, but that 3 years is only when it's a 3-bird bag limit. So it could take 10 years to reach that 3-year, if that makes sense, right? So depending on what the population is for that breeding pair survey, it's going to spit out a number, and then wherever that lands, and they haven't set those metrics yet, right? They have the lower metric set. So it used to be 1.75 million pintail would be a closed season if it got below that, right? And it's only been below that 3 times in the history of doing it. Right?
Where is this 1.75 number coming from? How is this
From the
full
breeding pair surveys
Breeding pair
on
surveys, full continent?
Canada and U.S.
Gotcha,
North
okay.
America breeding pair survey, yeah. And so they changed that number to 1.2 million is the cutoff now. So they lowered that
Lowered it.
cutoff.
Okay.
And so, but we don't know what the 2-bird cutoff is and the 3-bird cutoff is yet. And I think that's all going to come out once they get the breeding pair survey. They can run the numbers and kind of put it into this adaptive harvest management strategy.
In perspective, what was our breeding survey last year?
Last year was 2.21 million.
Oh,
But in 2022 was one of the lowest that we had. It was 1.78. So it was really close to actually hitting that threshold.
Makes me feel better about it not being closed if it's at 1.2 for the new bottom.
So basically at
level of it.
1.2, it's never hit 1.2
Gotcha.
from my understanding. So if the
They'd
new
have to
model
really
holds,
go.
it will never have a close.
So something would really,
season,
really bad have to happen for it to get closed.
Yeah. So we're trying to learn, right? We've had 40 years of regulated pintail harvest, and the pintail population hasn't responded, right? So harvest obviously is not affecting the population. So that's been our argument all along, that we can afford to have a little bit more harvest on pintail, and that's kind of what this new science is showing. And so once we get those years where we have 3, we can learn from it. We're going to learn and see what it did. So it's exciting as a scientist, right? Because it's experimental. You get to learn how the harvest is going to affect the pintail population, especially when you went from 1 and now you're going to bump it up to 3. So
yeah.
it will know in August. They'll wrap up the breeding pair survey, and pretty much all of the breeding pair surveys will be out there. And then we'll have an idea of what that number is for pintail. And then from there, the Fish and Wildlife Service is going to run the model, and then we'll know what the season will be in 2025, 2026 season.
Yeah.
And all of the more recent banding data coming from operations like ours are being used in this new model. So before then, it was 2009 was the
2010 was the
latest banding data they've used, but now they've updated it with all the most current banding data. So a lot more current information, a lot more accurate.
Yeah, I think like most hunters, we had a number of years where it was 2 pintail, right? And I think that's where people get frustrated, where it's like they don't get the intricacies and all the models and how complex they are.
Yeah, it's
people
crazy.
want to go shoot pin. That's what they're seeing, especially here in California. That's what they're seeing on the landscape, right? They're seeing pintail. So as a rice hunter, to be able to shoot 2 pintail a day is great. Go out, shoot 2 bulls, go, right?
You remember how smart they get, though, when you can shoot 2 of them?
It seemed like it. Well, it's like any day. Like
Imagine 3.
Yeah,
how
either
smart they're
shoot
gonna
a bull
get.
really
Yeah.
quick and there's pintail all over you, or
Yeah.
it takes you forever to shoot the
Yeah.
one.
I remember
and
the
they
split
come.
season
when
when we had a split season, and you could shoot them, and then they got, they get really smart, and then it closed, and they got really dumb, and then it opened again, and they, you get them again, and then they get really smart again. So,
Yeah.
it's just a cycle of.
So you think about going from 1 pintail to 3 pintail, that's 3 times as much hunting pressure on pintail.
Yeah.
You could expect them to be 3 times as smart and wary.
Which is interesting because, is that caution that they might now proceed with actually not going to affect the overall harvest, because how many guys are going to be able to go harvest 3 per day per person? It's actually going to end up being like 1 to 2. Some guys get 3 every once in a while, but because of their newfound wariness, is it going to be harder to shoot them?
That's kind of why it's an interim model. I mean, all this stuff is kind of
There's so many unanswered questions for
seeing
all
how
of
much
it.
how much harvest really affects birds is
Yeah.
going to be interesting.
Well, that's the thing where it's like hunting does nothing to populations. We know that. So then I think where the
To a
frustration
point, right? If you get certain species, certain
Right.
goose species, it definitely can. market hunting obviously had an effect on them. Right
That was
before we had regulated
unregulated
hunting.
sport hunting. So I'm
So
talking
there's
about
there is a point, right?
yeah,
where
we're
you have
talking
to-
about
yeah,
regulated sport hunting with rules, right? And
with
I think,
sustainable populations.
yeah, and that's where I think a lot of hunters have the question is like, why can't we go do X if you could shoot 7 widgeon a day or whatever? But it's so much more than that, and I think that's where a lot of hunters have the misconceptions, right? And get frustrated because we've all been there, been in the blind, and there's thousands of pintail flying over, and you're just sitting there hoping on a widgeon to come in or something else, you know? But,
Yep. Yeah, in my understanding, there's no sex limits on it as well. You can shoot 3 hens if and when it does open. There's going to be no sex specific regulations on the pintail. And
Which
then-
is interesting. I mean,
Well, you'd have to try to do that.
I was gonna say the easy thing about pintail is even early on in the season you can tell them apart pretty well.
and the majority of them
Yeah.
are drakes. And
but when it was 2, could you only have 1 hen?
I believe it was only one
yeah,
hen.
that's what I
I
thought.
don't remember.
I think it was one
Pretty
hen.
positive. Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah. And then the Atlantic flyway too, they don't harvest a lot of pintail at all. So if it's an open season on pintail, then they automatically get 3.
What?
So they don't have a threshold there because they just have no impact on harvest. I mean, they hardly shoot any pintail.
like everybody complains, like, well, you can go to Canada and shoot 8 sprig. What's the problem? And it's like, well, their harvest is
There's no one
so
hunting.
much lower compared to,
Yeah.
I mean, the continental United States. It's ridiculous that they showed us when we were at NADS. They showed us the harvest
Yeah.
rates. And Canada was so. You'd think everybody goes to Canada, everybody talks about how good it is, but the truth is it's not that way, and their harvest is so low that
Yeah.
they can get away with shooting 8. And you're up there, in September when all the birds are brown, they're all young, and you can't. I mean, telling the difference between a mallard and a sprig can be pretty tough, much less a drake versus a hen. And so it just makes more sense for them to have an eight sprig limit.
Is California on the higher end of the sprig harvest for the country?
definitely.
Because of
Yeah, I
all of
don't
our
know what the
rice and the percentage
percentage
of hunters and
I mean, we get 40% of the continent's pintail population, so just that, and
We just have-
just in California.
Yeah.
so that's huge.
we have the chance to kill them, and we have hunters out there doing it.
Yep.
Yeah, but like to the Canada thing, it's so vast. People don't understand, like, you don't even see another hunter. And it'd be like hunting in Colusa County and never hearing another shot.
Right.
It's so vast. Or like when hunters go down into Mexico, same type of thing. There's just not a lot of people hunting. Yeah, the limits might be higher, but the overall take is extremely low.
See, it's because I've never been to Canada, but I never would have expected that. Because you just hear everybody talking about it,
Yeah,
and everybody seems like they go up there every year. But
Yeah, you
I
see
just
all
never
the
been
YouTube
up there and
videos.
never experienced it.
My experience was like you just drive and drive and drive, and it's just ag fields and small towns, vast lands. Yeah, like when you talk to a farmer, like, oh, my cousin Bill hunts every once in a while, and you talk to Bill. Yeah, we go up once or twice a year. Like that was their hunting, right? But you don't even hear anyone shoot, and it's like one of those things where it's like I've tried to tell people it's like driving around the Sac Valley and like, man, I wish I could hunt that field. And you just go to the landowner or whoever and like, can we hunt that field? Yeah, go for it. Don't you know? It's like, okay, there you go.
and your 8
that's it.
pintail that one day is not going to make a difference for the overall flyway.
Yeah, and I mean, I think where you're at too, it's like some places shoot more specs, some people shoot more lessers.
Mallards.
Mallard, we didn't, where we were at, there wasn't a whole lot of duck shooting in the fields, right? It was mostly geese. So I think it's all like anywhere, like here, it's regional.
Yeah.
We shoot a lot of pintail in the rice. In the Butte Sink and place in the Delta, they shoot more mallards. So it's just wherever you're shooting.
Okay, well, let's go over the. And please explain to me what that is first, and then go over the numbers.
Well, just to set the stage, like right now we're late June, which is kind of the tail end of nesting season.
Yeah.
And so we've been monitoring nests and stuff. July 15th is our cutoff for our delayed programs and stuff. But yeah, Jason.
Do you want to do the intro to that question?
We're just running, bro.
Yeah, so we help manage the Nesting Bird Habitat Incentive Program, which is funded by California Department of Fish and Wildlife. Luke Matthews over there also helps run that side of the program. We do like the contracts and paying the farmers and doing the monitoring in the field. But basically, yeah, the Nesting Bird Habitat Incentive Program is funded by that extra surcharge on the upland stamp and the state duck stamp. All that money goes to providing nesting habitat for waterfowl and pheasants in California. Under that program, we kind of have 3 different programs: the rice levy program, the delayed cereal, or more well known as the delayed wheat program, and then the fallow ag program, which includes both fallow and cover crops. And so, yeah, and come April, well, for the rice levy program, we accept applications in like October, September, November, sometime in there, when guys are getting done with rice harvest and they're starting to think about plans for next year. And then for the delayed cereal grain and the fallow ag program, we accept applications in April. And basically, they're all incentive programs. They pay different rates based on what you got and what you're willing to let us do with your fields. For example, like the rice levy program is still pretty new, and it's kind of a new concept, so we leave it as a bid program. So farmers basically tell us what it costs to leave their rice levies untouched from January 1st until July 15th. Because a lot of times they'll ridge their levies in April, right before they plant, and then there's no vegetation left on them in May, June, July, when the birds want to nest. Delayed cereal grain, anywhere from $50 to $75 an acre, depending on how much monitoring you will allow us to do within the fields. And that's just to delay the harvest of your wheat or barley or triticale crop until July 15th. And then the fallow ag program, which is just to leave your field fallow or with a planted cover crop in it. And then for fallow vegetation, it's $30 an acre. And for cover crops, $110 an acre. And again, that's July 15th. And then, yeah, we're out there currently monitoring a bunch of fields, not all of them. We picked a subset of them, hopefully a representative sample of what we have enrolled in the program. Like the rice levies, we have technicians that go out there every couple weeks, walk down the top of the levees, searching with a noise-making device, trying to flush the hens off their nest, seeing what they're finding. We're dragging ropes through fallow and cover crop fields, and then we're doing some hand dragging on some wheat fields as well. I think currently we have 1,700 acres enrolled in the rice levy program, 1,200 in the fallow ag program / cover crops, and then 1,900 in the delayed wheat program. So that's all kind of starting to wrap up. We're starting our last round of nest searches. So basically, we have a group of technicians and myself that go out to the fields. Every day we have a set schedule, and those fields that we're searching get searched every 3 weeks. And then any marked nests that we have found in those fields get checked on weekly. And then we also have end vegetation measurements, so we try to come back within 5 or 6 days of when that hen was supposed to hatch, whether or not she did or got predated or abandoned, and just take vegetation measurements on what the field would have looked like when she was supposed to hatch. Trying to get more just data. And then, once July 15th rolls around, I send out all the checks to all the farmers, and they're welcome to do with their field what they please. We try to, if there's any other remaining nests, we let the farmers know. A lot of times they're cool about it and just let the field go until all the nests are out of there. If they're not, we just run in there and salvage whatever eggs are left. And it's a great program. Puts a lot of habitat on the ground for our locally nesting birds, and hopefully it continues to gain traction. And we see a spike in the population because of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a decent amount of acreage for such a new program. It can only go up from there, gaining traction. People spread the word and realize it's good for their pockets.
And we try to be real flexible. Like we put them in a contract like July 15th, but we had a couple hundred acres this year that hey, the sunflowers are getting real bad in our fields and it's affecting my neighbor's commercial sunflower field with pollination and stuff. We got to swath this thing. And it's got to understand, let me know if you find any duck nests in there, we'll salvage them. If not, we'll just knock that field off of your contract and you just won't get paid for it. We're not going to penalize you or anything for that.
Yeah.
I mean, we try to be as flexible as possible and try to get as many acres enrolled as possible.
Yeah, no, that's understandable. You guys have anything else you want to touch on?
Wood duck dinner. Come celebrate the 1 millionth wood duck with us. We got the new dinner this year in Stockton.
Okay.
And it's going to be July 27th.
July 27th
so we're looking
in
forward
Stockton.
to having a fun dinner and celebrating that 1 millionth wood duck. I'll be there. I think Jason might be there. Maybe.
Possibly.
Unless he's bass fishing. But
Kind of
we'll
a
be
bass
there.
tournament, we'll see.
So come celebrate that 1 millionth wood duck with us.
Right on. Find tickets online.
It should be under our events on the website, calwaterfowl.com. under the events.
Cool. Right on.
Well, we appreciate you guys coming out again,
Yeah.
being on the podcast with us.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Save It for the Blind podcast. You can find our podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.